We'd like to thank GoDaddy, our sponsor for our podcast from Node.js Interactive in Austin, Texas. You may know GoDaddy as a hosting company, but they also have a deep involvement in the Node.js ecosystem. You can learn more at godaddy.com. That's GODADDY.com. GoDaddy.com. Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack here for day 2 of Node.js Interactive in Austin, Texas. And today we're going to be talking a lot about security, and I'm here with 2 people who are actually participating in the conference, Guy Podjarny and Gergely Nemeth, is that it?
Yeah, that's correct.
And Guy, you just spoke, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit what you discussed. And Gergely, you're speaking later on today on security matter. So you're with Snyk, and maybe you could also just tell us a little bit about what Snyk is, and then just help us summarize what you discussed and how it pertains to like the end user out there today.
High level, our mission is to help you use open source and stay secure. And there are some fundamental challenges around owning open source security, especially when you're not talking about the big projects, the sort of Angular project that's backed by Google or React by Facebook, but rather the 300,000 packages in NPM that are oftentimes built by 1-2 individuals, just sort of in the internet on their spare time. So big hairy question around how who should be responsible for securing those components. Do they have security knowledge, security attention? And then also the consumption of these packages is it's quite complex and indirect. So when there is a vulnerability in one of these packages that was already found and that was already fixed, we see that it takes a very long time for people to just find out about it and then pull in those fixes and secure their application that uses the packages. So what we do at Snyk is we give you tools that integrate into your development flow to help you find vulnerable NPM packages and Ruby and as well, with more languages coming, and then fix those as easily as possible. There's literally like a single button click fix that sort of figures out the right patches and upgrades you need to do to fix the problem, and then do that continuously, as well as getting alerted to new vulnerabilities so you can respond to them fast. So this is what we do. This is kind of a lot of what we work in the Node space, and we're also part of the Node.js Foundation, kind of helping boost security there. And what my talk was about, which kind of relates to this, is first kind of raising awareness to that specifically. So making people aware of the fact that they should know whether they're using vulnerable NPM packages, whether they use Snyk for that or anything, the tool of their choice. And then second, these packages actually serve as a really good example of real-world vulnerabilities. When you talk about security education, nothing is more impactful than seeing a live exploit of a vulnerability. And when you take packages like Mongoose and Marked, like very popular packages, well scrutinized, and you can see that they have a vulnerability. First of all, ego goes away. Like people sort of accept to say, okay, if these big packages have a vulnerability, then it's okay that I have it. And second, it's useful to learn from what was the mistake that they've made, understand its implications, because you can actually show kind of a live hack on it. And then try to avoid making the same mistakes in your own code. So this talk was, we have a sample vulnerable application, and we basically showed exploit on a bunch of them, kind of raising awareness both to the specific vulnerabilities and also to the secure code practices you can derive.
Back to that then. And so you're talking tomorrow, or you're talking today, right? And tell us a little bit about RisingStack and what you're going to be discussing.
Yeah, so RisingStack started as a Node.js development and consulting company, and in the past year we have been building a tool called Trace, which helps developers to debug and monitor Node.js applications as well as microservices. So that's our main focus. And as we are handling a lot of sensitive information from our users, security is one of our topmost priorities. And this is why I picked the topic, which is surviving web security. And today, little more about advanced topics in web security. So it's not gonna be like cross-site scripting attacks, but actually I will talk about attack trees, how you can use them to find potential attack vectors in your applications, and through attack trees I'm going to show RDoS attacks, I'm going to show timing attacks, and how the human factor comes into the picture when we are talking about security.
The human factor, maybe that we can talk about that a little bit, because the people who are building these applications, many of them are, there's kind of a wide spectrum of people. There's beginners, there's experts out there, but everybody makes mistakes, right? So what is your point of view on that? What's the approach that you are both advocating that end users think about? Because people are going to be making mistakes, and like the module ecosystem is so gigantic, and there's so much actually that you need to be thinking about, aware of. How does that, how do people, what is your like recommendation?
Yeah, I think when we are talking about human factor, it's a lot broader than actually just coding modules. So actually, a recent study shows that 95% of our security incidents involve some kind of human error. Whether it's coding, something was simply forgotten. So it's not just code, but actually how you operate your system. So it comes into the picture as well. But it comes to security issues in modules, then I think one of the biggest thing that we can do is education. So, for example, what Guy spoke about is like showing real-life problems, how you can fix them. So basically, you won't do that problem again. You won't do that mistake again.
Yeah, I think alongside kind of all these that are good practices as a whole, I think for open source security specifically, there's a little bit of a responsibility question. So I think I alluded to that before. We need to get better as a community in drawing the line around what is the responsibility of the open source author, the open source package author, versus the responsibility of the open source consumer. Because today what happens is the open source consumers think of this as off-the-shelf software, and they expect the same level of like entitlements and warranties that they get from vendors that they pay. The open source authors, they're doing this on their spare time, they're doing them for goodwill. They get some value out of it, but they definitely are not, you're not entitled to anything from these people that are sort of giving you value for free. So I think we need to better sort of delineate the two. As far as kind of my recommendation to the two entities, I think as an author, I think you should do your best to care. Like, kind of the first thing is, care about security, think about it, try to write secure code. And the second thing I would advise is to declare. So naturally, as you write code, you should you make security trade-offs. You decide whether or not to run a security test. You decide to communicate in HTTP versus HTTPS. That information is hidden in your head and in your code. If you can declare that, add a security.md file to your repo, just sort of inform people about that, it'll make it that much easier for the consumers to be kind of informed. And on the consumer side, I think what you need to do is just take responsibility and understand that you are getting this value for free, but it is on you to a large extent to understand if there are security flaws, if there are security mistakes, and not just sort of shed responsibility for it, build that into your own processes.
So when you think about these different issues, then you think about the overall, module ecosystem out there and how vast it is, right? What is it that you think needs to be done almost at the abstraction level, to help kind of, make these kind of larger principles that you're talking about for both the author and the end user more realistic, right? Because there can be a lot of community advocacy around these topics, but community advocacy can only go so far.
Yeah, I think so. Starting from what you cannot do is you cannot expect developers to become security experts. That's just infeasible. It's hard enough to be a developer these days, right? In terms of the volume, the avalanche of information you need to absorb, and you can't really expect them to build security expertise overnight. But I think the solution lies on one hand with tools. So you need sort of tooling providers, be it GitHub or be it tools like Snyk and Trace or other tools, to make it easy. Security has to be sufficiently easy for you to do it. Today, security is just too hard. And then as a community, I don't really have like a solution about how we do it, but what would be amazing is if we can figure out a way to incentivize secure code. Today, if you have an open source package and you spend a lot of time to make it secure, you really don't get any credit for it. There's no way for you to get some, security +1, right? Some kudos for it. You just, spent time that did not translate into function. So as a community, I think it would be amazing if, through GitHub, through others, through just sort of celebrating people that do it right, we find a way to just acknowledge and incentivize the people that do it well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And also, if I'm right, NPM, for example, working on a batch system, so module can be marked if they don't have any known security issues, which could be a great indicator even for from the consumer side that, okay, it's something that was verified, I can use it, probably it doesn't have any issues.
Yeah. And we see that. We see people adding, like the Snyk badge says vulnerability 0. It serves two purposes. One is it declares that this component has cared about this issue and has looked and saw that it's not using vulnerable dependencies. And 2 is it tells you that you should care, when you're looking at that repo, and raises awareness.
So tell us a little bit about the tool ecosystem out there, kind of in the context of security. How's it different now compared to like a year ago? What effect is that having?
I think that what was announced yesterday was a really great news. The Node security project just moved to the foundation. So basically, security is now part of the foundation, and I think it has a really great story that it becomes one of the topmost priorities of the foundation as well. So all vendors like Snyk, the Node security platform, Trace, can simply contribute to this security findings to make it really a community effort to secure the Node ecosystem, and I think that's great.
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's awesome to see the Node.js Foundation declaring, and I think they did the same at Node Summit and earlier this year, to talk about security as a top 3 item. That's not obvious, it's not a given, and it's great that attention happens, that at conferences like this, there are multiple security talks. I do a lot of conference talks, and, it's really not a given that in a developer conference you'll have it. So first, awareness, I think, has grown dramatically over the course of the last year. In terms of the tooling ecosystem, I think there are more vendors in here. I'm a believer. I think building a business around open source is a really tricky thing, and when done well, I think it contributes to both a promising business and sort of a thriving community. So I think we're basically in that exploration phase right now. There are tools like NPM, for instance, that's not security oriented, but it is a commercial entity within the open source Node space. And there's always some complexities around how NPM and the Node.js Foundation interact. And the Node.js Foundation kind of tracking vulnerable packages is a good example of this. The vulnerable packages are in NPM. They're not in Node. So on one hand, it's great that the foundation does it. On the other hand, again, there's just like some unclear ownership. It comes back to kind of this like ownership and delineation. But again, I don't think anybody can anticipate the perfect answer right now. But what I feel is there's a lot of evolution in the tooling space right now. Snyk, I think, is a component of it. We see sort of the Node.js Foundation working on a lot of security in the Node space. Tools like Trace and Node Source have integrated with us, for instance, to sort of build tracking and identifying of vulnerable packages on running servers, and we have a bunch of those. So I think a lot of it is around building awareness, subsequently tools, and around bringing that tooling back into your existing workflow. I think that's maybe another evolution that happened this year, is that instead of expecting you to learn and embrace and independently use an entirely new tool, these tools, like Snyk coming to GitHub, or Trace doing a variety of monitoring and bringing some of the security assessment into it, or in Node Source when you're monitoring kind of your runtime platform, all of these tools come to your existing practices and make security a built-in component.
So it's that workflow then that you need, really.
Yeah, and also that it's really, so make it accessible. So basically, it shouldn't be a hassle, but yeah, as Guy described as well, for example, with Trace, our users don't really have to do anything. So they just updated our Trace collector version and they got the security feature. So that's a really convenient way to have some kind of security in place with basically zero effort.
There's like fundamentally everybody wants to be secure, but there's how much they want, and then there's how much effort it is.
Right.
And they need to want it more than it is effort. So the two ways to make security happen is to increase how much people care, which is a long process that needs to happen, and we get the help of news and headlines that sort of raise awareness to it, and we get the help of talks like this. And then there's the path of just using it easier. And I think that's where a lot of the tooling opportunity kicks in. Is just make it simple, make it accessible, allow you to continue to move at your existing pace, but build secure software in the process.
So what will the security group do to help you as tool makers contribute more, to the overall kind of that workflow experience we're talking about? What is it? What is that? What is the role that security user group really going to be for you as tool makers?
Probably, I think the first thing we should clear is how security disclosures work, because it's something that haven't been really clear as I see. So if there are some known issues, how should it be disclosed? When should it be disclosed? If it's either fixed or not. So I think that's one thing that this group have to define first.
Yeah, and I think I would kind of point to three, key items. One is keeping the Node.js runtime itself secure, and I think they're doing an excellent job at it. I think that has dramatically improved since the foundation has been created. And I know I'm kind of a little bit of a broken record here, but I think that comes back a little bit to ownership, which is it's very clear who needs to own that and take care of it, and they're doing a great job at it. The second is awareness, because I think the Node.js Foundation, people look to it to understand what is a best practice and what you should do. And again, I think coming to events like this is another component. I think the security user group is the one that sort of sets the tone around what should be emphasized and what shouldn't be. So those conversations are happening. That's great. And then lastly, on a technical level, I think it's about support for the different tools. So sometimes you need hooks in the runtime to be able to perform some instrumentation or get some visibility, or be able to run something post installation so that you can modify a vulnerability. Or so I think just being responsive and aware and collaborative with the vendors is useful. There's a little bit. It's very easy to take security tools as finger pointers. It's very easy to say, hey, at Node, you want to say Node is secure, and or like at NPM, for instance, right? NPM as an entity is very secure, but they have a lot of these packages, and these packages are sometimes insecure, and it's easy to interpret somebody highlighting vulnerable NPM packages as pointing a finger at NPM and saying, you shouldn't be doing this because it's insecure, and it's not at all the message. And in the world of security as a whole, and in the world of Node and NPM specifically, I think it's critical that the anchor tenants, that NPM and Node, look at the security tooling, at the security research that happens, and collaborate with those tools, as opposed to trying to pretend that the problems don't exist. And I think there's a little bit of improvement to be had there in the current space.
What's the improvement that's needed?
I guess I feel like this is going very, very well on the Node front over the last year, but sometimes in the NPM space, be it the NPM package owners or sometimes the NPM kind of platform, you do see some more pushback around, preferring to not have the conversation on some of the issues versus sort of accepting, almost thankfully, right, the fact that there are problems. So it's just like it's been a little bit more inconsistent in the sort of the NPM package space and NPM space. In the Node space, I think right now there's a lot of arms wide open to researchers and security tools that kind of come and help eventually secure the platform.
I guess that speaks to the both the working together and then some of the inherent conflicts that come with Node and NPM.
Yeah, it's finger pointing a little bit, right? You're pointing out a flaw nobody likes.
Yeah.
When you call their baby ugly. So
right.
it's not a simple thing.
Right. it's a whole topic in itself. So so what's your view on that? I mean, in terms of like, the thought about that conflict and the kind of inherent conflict. We're seeing this a lot, kind of not just in NPM too, but like in in module management overall. There's a lot of different kind of groups out there that are that may have like they need to work together better. Like is it TC39? Is that what it is? Or is, in the Node.js community, right? And thinking about actually what do actually people use, and what would be like the common kind of ability for you to be able to make them be able to work, these different modules be able to work together, right? And and so this seems to be kind of like one of those like just very long-term kind of problems that we see in the ecosystem overall.
Yeah, I think when I first met with security, it was like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Actually, it was Adam's talk in Lisbon. So I think actually that was the time that the .security project was announced.
Yeah.
So since then, a lot of things improved there. But yeah, it's a long process.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's also not a process. Just to clarify, we're here talking about Node and NPM, but this problem exists throughout the sort of the sphere of open source and open source packages.
Yeah.
And I think NPM is ahead in terms of adoption and distribution. And Node, just the sheer growth of it, make it a little bit of a flag bearer for
the volume of it is
for the problem, right? It's an extreme manifestation of a problem that actually exists in various environments. Like we support Ruby as well, and there are different practices there, with gems being global and with the lock file encouraging less updated deliverables, and so like each ecosystem has its own variant of the problems. But it's important to also understand that it's not that unique. I think what the Node.js Foundation really helps us is the fact that there is sort of this clear entity that we work with regarding to many of these conversations. If you look at Ruby, leadership is not quite as clear, right? If you look at Java, it's like more fragmented. So I think Node is an opportunity for us to sort of get many of these things right. Like for me at Snyk, we started with Node because we believe that Node is kind of the opportunity to set a model to how to sort of truly tackle securing the sort of open source package ecosystems. And now that we sort of feel like this is in a good state and needs a ton of work still, we're sort of expanding to other spaces. And I still believe that path.
Well, great. Well, thank you guys both for taking some time to talk with us today. I appreciate it, and
Thanks for having us.
have a good time with the show, and and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for having
Thanks.
us. Cheers.
We'd like to thank GoDaddy, our sponsor for our podcast from Node.js Interactive in Austin, Texas. You may know GoDaddy as a hosting company, but they also have a deep involvement in the Node.js ecosystem. You can learn more at GoDaddy.com. That's GoDaddy.com. GoDaddy.com.